Right, so I've spent a bit of time this year learning Blender. Thought I'd do a quick video just to sort of go over some of the little bits and pieces that I've found, and yeah, I hope you find them useful too. First thing up is, you know, I've got my little boiler here, cute little stylized boiler. It's rendering flat shaded right now, so what I want to do is actually render it with the smooth shade. So I'm going to select all the objects, go, which I can actually also do just by clicking nowhere and going A, right, to select all. Go object and then shade smooth. Right, that's actually going to smooth shade it. You can see that now I'm getting some sort of blobby areas, so I actually want to mark some hard normals. So I'm going to select them all again, and then navigate down here to this little triangle with the vertices, right, which is Object Data Properties in the Normals tab, and go Auto Smooth, right. Now you can see that that's just sort of affecting the first object in this queue. So what I can actually do is click Alt and click that, right? And you'll see that that's actually going to apply that setting to all the selected objects that have that setting available, right? And this is really useful if you want to modify multiple objects at once. You can also hold down Alt and then drag this, right? And it will modify the angle value for all of the different objects. Right, so if I go Alt, hold down Alt, tap in 45, I've actually set 45 degrees for all of that. So that's actually very useful for modifying a large number of objects all at once. So I get this auto smooth. The other thing that I like doing is actually selecting them all, going to hold down Alt again, set it up to 180, and if I feel like it, I can now actually click individual objects. I'm going to use my little plugin to focus selected, and go to for lines, Alt to select the whole line, right click, and then mark as sharp, right? And that actually allows me to set which normals I want to have hard and which normals I want to have soft. So I actually like doing this because this lets me have a little bit more control over the presentation of my object. Because, you know, especially in an object like this, it makes sense that some of the seams are going to be sharp and some of them are going to have that nice sort of rounded look to them. Right, yeah, so that's managing the normals. Next up, the symmetry options. Right, so say I had this thing. I'm actually going to show you something else. You can go to local view, right, which is very useful when you just want to edit one model. Right, so if I toggle that, you can also do that by going to the view, and then I think it is in, let's see, local view. There you go, toggle local view, which is numpad. I don't actually have access to a numpad right now on a laptop, but this view menu will also do the same thing. Local view's pretty awesome once you get used to it, very handy. So what I'm going to show here is a symmetry option. I usually use the modifier, but I'll show you a different option here. So I can select everything. You can go mesh and then symmetrize if you want to bake that symmetry in, right? And you can actually select which axes you want to symmetrize it. So let's say plus y to negative y. If we want to get rid of that, let's actually go the other way. So negative y to plus y, right? And now we have our little sort of vent, you know, the hatch openings on both sides, which is useful. But the one that I want to do is actually the modifier, right? So we're going to go mirror in this modifier tab. You can see that the axis is on the X plane. We want to select bisect, so we're not going to duplicate that mesh up. And yeah, so now when I modify this mesh, you'll see that we're actually mirror modeling. This is a great way to save time. What I usually like to do, if I'm just doing this from the start, because it has a couple of quirks to it. For example, you can see here, I can actually push that vert all the way through the object, right, without it mirroring, which is kind of annoying, or without it stopping. I usually like to apply it once, right, so go apply, and then add it again, right, because what that's actually, and then bisect X, what that's actually done is it's, if it wasn't already perfectly symmetrical, it will have added this nice cut right through the middle, right, and that's very useful. Something that makes it easier to see the different models, you can go up here and what I like to do is actually turn on the cavity rendering, so you can see it sort of makes details pop, right? And then I want it to be in both, right, screen space and world, right? And that gives me a little bit of ambient occlusion, a little bit of specularity, lets me see sort of like where my details, you know, where my object might be a bit low resolution, and I start seeing the sort of tries popping out, which isn't super great when that happens. But yeah, doing this just means that you can get a little bit more fidelity to the viewport. Also, like, you know, you've got the option of the matte caps. You can keep it completely flat if you want, but if you actually use one of the matte caps, like the studio matte caps, you have an option of a few different ones. You can start seeing details like this, like how light plays across the surface, right? And this sort of tells me that I need to pay a bit more attention to how these normals are being defined here. So I can sort of scale that in a little bit, right? Mark it sharp, right? Gives me a little bit of a harder plane there. So, you know, these are things that you can keep an eye out for using different viewport options. And it's also more fun to look at. All right. Something else that's really useful is, you know, say I wanted to edit this object, but I only wanted to edit the, you know, this part of it, the hatch part, and ignore all of the little bits. I can press L, right? And I can select all the linked parts of that mesh. So we can say by seam, by UVs, which is, I've already UV mapped this mesh. This is actually very useful just to select portions of the mesh by their UV shell. Or you can say seam, which I'll select shells of that mesh, right? You see if I just click a little rivet, it's only going to give me that rivet. Say I wanted to actually modify the rivets as well, I can select these, right? So I've just shift selected and gone L to basically select all of the linked parts. Then if I go Control I can select the inverse of what I had, right? Which gives me all those rivets. This can be really useful, you know, if you just want to sort of work on isolated bits, or say I wanted to actually separate these, I can press P and separate by selection, for example, right? That'll actually give me the rivets separately, so I can then, you know, do whatever I want to the hatch. So I wanted to rename those rivets, I can press F2, right, and that'll actually give me the rename thing. So hatch, rivets, you know, geo or something, whatever. I'm a big fan of you know, trying to keep the names reasonably neat. So I showed how you can split those objects. Also show you how to join them. So you can select, say I want all these rivets joined. You can go Control J to join those together. Now they're just one object, right? Same with pipes. So I wanted to, you know, weld those pipes together. Control J. Now the pipes are all one thing, right? Yeah. And if I wanted to split them, like I said before, you select it. You can go into edit mode. You don't even have to have all of them selected for splitting by parts. You go P, select the by loose parts. And it'll actually separate the object into all the loose pieces that were in there. Right, so that's really useful. Another J related hotkey, which is really, really handy. If I select this, go to vertex mode, select the vertices, and press J, it'll actually insert vertices along to link those two together. This is so useful and so much quicker than using the knife tool for the same thing. I use that a lot when I'm trying to cut shapes into other shapes. It's a lot more precise and a lot quicker, right? So yeah, it's just selecting those things and yeah, pressing J to join them. Another thing which is really useful is showing wireframe. So you can see I've gone out of this, now I can't see the wireframe anymore. There's two ways of showing it. On a per object basis, you can go to the object properties, viewport display, and go wireframe, right? And that'll actually always render that wireframe on top, which is super useful. Right? The other thing we can do is you can show things like the axes, which is useful if you're doing things like armature stuff. You can show the name of the object, which is really useful if you're dealing with a lot of different objects that have specific names and specific reasons for being there. Yeah, and there's a few other things like in front and all the rest of it, right? Which is really useful. Now, if you want to just sort of switch between wireframe on and off, just to sort of check the whole model, right? There's the viewport space option here to render wireframe, right? Which is very useful because you can actually render that and toggle it just to keep check on how clean your geo is and how everything's looking. So the final thing that I'm going to show is face orientation, which is really useful. So like if I click this, tab 3A N, is Alt N, flip. So I've sort of faked this time. You can see blue for normals which are facing outside, and then red for faces which are reversed. If I go inside that object, you can see that it's the opposite. You can see that I'm seeing these reversed faces, and this is the face that's facing inwards. This is really important for game dev. So basically the red ones are back faces, right? And the blue ones are for front faces, right? So pretty much like which way is the outside of these objects. To fix that, you can select it, tab to enter edit mode. Oh, make sure I've got the right object selected. Tab 3A Alt N flip, right? And that actually recalculates the normals to face outside, right? So, and the viewport display option I had there was face orientation, right? So yeah, so there's a few handy little Blender tips. I hope that helped you in your Blender journeys, and yeah, I might do another one of these later.